To make the Penny Pingleton wig, I started by finding a great picture online that I'm going to use as my inspiration. Next, I took my pool noodle and my scroll saw and cut them down into strips that range anywhere from 1 inch all the way up to almost 2 inches in width. Although this is almost too big, ideally 1.5 inches is really a good size. So this one will probably end up cutting down or cutting in half to use for the wig. Next, I take a large 12 by 18 sheet of craft foam and the template that I have for the skull cap, and I'm going to cut out 2 of each of these pieces, and then I will use the glue gun to assemble the skull cap. So with the inspirational picture that I have using as my guide, I've created this whole front row of about, say 18 to 19 inch long strips of the pool noodles. And I did sort of this front row, and also there are a few behind it, sort of creating a second row that's very tight up to the front. So what I'm doing per this picture is I'm creating this sort of big bouffant. It's gonna look something like this. It's gonna be a little bit tighter and a little bit neater, but it's gonna be something like this. And so you can see there's gaps and there's holes you can see through. So that's where I'll be adding additional rows of pool noodles inside, so that when all the foam hair is gathered, you aren't going to you won't see any gaps. And then this bouffant is only really going to come down, as you see in this picture, the bouffant only comes down about 3/4 of the way down her neck. And then, so that's what I'll do on the foam wig as well. And what I've done, I just did a mock-up. I took a bunch of long strips of foam and I started pinning them, and I'm bringing them up sort of from the back, kind of up and to the side, just as a place marker to show me, okay, this is how far down I'm going to stop with the bouffant. And then the back, I'll make these long strips. And this is going to end up being her whole side ponytail here on this side. And then once all of that is completed, I'll go back, and the final steps will be to create her front bangs to finish it off. So, next steps is to continue filling in the strips for the bouffant. After attaching some more of the yellow pool noodles, what I did on the inside was I took just a long piece of leftover orange pool noodle, a little bit thicker piece that I had, and I kind of created this internal skeletal structure with it. I glued it kind of to the top part of the head, the pins are still in it, just holding the glue in, and then glued it down 3/4 of the way down where the hair is going to end in the back. And the reason for this is, real hair, when you do a bouffant, you're going to be able to bring it around and kind of tuck it into itself to create a nice tucked look in the back. And so that's what I intend to do with this. Once I bring all of these bouffant pieces of hair down, I'm going to kind of overlap them and sort of create, by cutting and gluing, kind of a folded and tucked in look. And with this piece in the back, I'll be able to hot glue the sort of several of the bottom layers of the hair to this structure, and then the top layers I can come back over and create this tucked look. So now I went and I basically created a 3rd row of the pool noodles. So we have the front row which is kind of smooth. Then there's this 2nd row, and which is tight. It's kind of tight and in between each of the front row pieces. And then I went about, an inch and a half or so back and created this whole third row. Created this whole third row all the way around. And so now I think there's enough. I'm gonna start gathering and forming this bouffant. And how I'll do it is I'll probably start with this third row and kind of put it down, start attaching it to this internal structure in the back. And just build each row on top of that and creating that tucked look. Before I actually form the bouffant with these top pieces, strips of pool noodle, what I've decided to do is to put on and form that big side ponytail. And what I did was I cut, when you cut your pool noodles from the big giant roll, you're going to be left with these very, very thin pieces that you can almost see through them. They're so thin. And so what I did was I just cut them down to about 1/2-inch strips that are the full length of the pool noodle, and I'm going to use those to go up the sides and to create this long ponytail on each side. So I'm going to do that first, and that way if there's any gaps left over, I can always add another sort of side strip of bouffant hair if needed. So at this point, I got my model to put on the wig, and then I just kind of used this washable marker to draw. I could sort of feel and draw around where her ear is. It doesn't quite match up with the ear on my mannequin head, but a real person, that's about where her ear is. And so after I had it drawn, I was able to cut it out. I cut out one side, and then what I did is I just turned it around. I used the piece that I cut out, and I flipped it, turned it around the other side, and just traced it onto that, so that I got an exact sort of symmetrical cutout match for the whole section. And now I'm going to start by gluing on the side hair that's going to end up in a big side ponytail. I wanted to show how I'm doing these side hairs. So I'm taking a strip of the very thin pool noodle. It's about, I'd say about 24 inches long. And I'm going to take my hot glue gun and I'm going to glue it directly onto the skull cap. And I want my pony, whatever you want to call it, this ponytail, to be sort of above the ear and just behind it a little bit. So that's where I'm going to end the glue. Rather than try to glue onto the back of the strip like I do with the others, I'm going to glue onto the skull cap. It'll just make it easier to place it. So I'm going to take my glue and just put a little bead on there. I'm going to end right where I want it to end. And then I'm going to actually overlap. I'm going to overlap onto this piece, and I'm going to extend it and come out beyond the front of where the skull cap is. I'll tell you why in a minute. Okay, I'm going to pin this down so that the glue can dry. The reason I've come out beyond is then when I go back, once all this is dry and in place, I can go back and I can cut a nice perfect line straight down, and the front of that will look perfectly cut, like a perfect hairdo piece. So I'm just going to keep doing this. This is where the ponytail is going to come out. So now what I'll start doing, just in your natural, just like your natural hair, I'm going to start doing the pieces up like this, and they'll just kind of keep going up, up, up. They'll go from the back, like there's a part down the back, and toward this section where there's going to be the ponytail. Okay, so it's time for me to gather all of these strands and create this big bouffant sort of bump on the top of the wig. But if I just gather them all and put them in the back like this, this is going to be a huge bulge in the back, which won't look good or natural. Remember, the inspiration is this look over here, and as you can see, the back, the bottom part of the hair and the top bump kind of are all in this sort of same level, I guess, if you will, in the back. So I need to try to achieve that look in the back. I also have another sample picture of a foam wig with lots of pieces of the foam that are kind of tucked into each other, as you can see on that. So it's gonna be kind of a combination of both. So what I'm doing for this wig then, I'll zoom back out. Is I've started, there's basically two different layers here. We've got this front layer of pool noodles, which is what I call the best slices. This is the very shiny, smooth outer surface of the pool noodle after you slice, after you go around and slice off the first part. And then the rest of the inside of the pool noodle is a lot coarser, which is fine from a distance. You don't really notice it too much. But those are what I'm calling my filler pieces. So what I'm doing for those, ultimately I'm hoping that you're just gonna see these shiny, nice pieces on the outside once it's all put back. So for these inside pieces, these sort of supporting pieces, these were this length. And so I cut these off, and I'm kind of tucking them, I'm gonna glue them in behind this support structure, so that when I come around with my good shiny piece, I'm gonna be able to come around, make it look like a tuck, and it won't be too bulgy. It'll still be kind of in line with that bottom piece. So this is what I'm gonna do all the way around inside with these supporting pieces. I'm gonna kind of cut them off so that they all fit, they're even, or they fit inside with this supporting structure, so that then when I go back over with the shiny pieces, I can fold them all over, make them look more natural, and it won't be like this huge, massive bump in the back. So we're gonna try our best and see what we come up with. Just a quick update for how I'm wrapping the back. So what I'm doing is I'm starting with is the whole left side, and I took all of the smooth pieces and I brought them to the back. And I actually had to add a couple here and there, just a couple of like partial pieces, and you can't even tell, it just looks like the normal part of the hair. So I'm bringing them up the back and I'm cutting them right down the middle, right down the center of this orange tube. What I decided to do is, because some of the pieces were very, very thin, you could actually see through them, and I wasn't going to do additional layers. I didn't want you to see that orange, so I just covered the orange tube up with a piece of craft foam. No big deal. So after I did most of the pieces on the left side and cut them down the center, what I'm going to do next is I'll bring these pieces over from this other side, and I'll kind of wrap them. I'll wrap the very, very ends. I'll turn the ends under. So it'll look like this all the way, most of the way up. And then the very, very top pieces will just come back and I'll kind of wrap those under. So you'll see with the finished product, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what I'm doing so far. Okay, so all of the sides are done. I did the left side, did that all down first, then came back with the right side, folded each one of these under, each of these under, all the way up. And now I'm going to kind of do the same thing with the top. The top are going to come down, and those are going to each kind of fold under like this. I might even come down a little bit farther and just kind of do an overlap. I'm gonna see how it looks. But yeah, so that's doing the last part is the top, and then I'll have the bangs left to finish. For the bangs, I cut out 6 pieces total. I drew 3 similarly shaped patterns on a piece of paper and then traced my pattern onto the pool noodles and cut out 3 for the left side, and then I just reversed the patterns and cut out 3 for the right side so they'd be symmetrical. I glued down 2 of the pieces on the bottom layer of each side, and then I glued 1 piece over the top of each of those for each side to finish the look. Next, instead of doing 1 big pigtail on each side of her head, I decided to pay homage to the original Hairspray movie and split it and create a double pigtail on each side of her head. You'll notice that her pigtails are twisted into curls. To achieve that look, I grabbed each bundle of pigtail and twisted it until it started to curl on its own. Then I used a can of spray adhesive and lightly sprayed the pigtail. While still holding on to the curled pigtail, I took a blow dryer on the warm setting and blew air on it until it basically retained the shape on its own. I repeated this process for all 4 of the individual pigtails, and then I just let the adhesive dry completely overnight. The next day, after the adhesive was dry and the pigtails had retained their shape, I chose a complementary color of acrylic paint and brushed on the highlights that you see. I think it'll really make it pop on stage. And with that, the Penny Pingleton wig is ready for the show.